And we're live, just about 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, Saturday, March 21st. Greetings, sir. And we have with us the great Denali.
Oh, for a moment I thought you were going to say the Great Gatsby.
No. I'm not a Gatsby. I'm a Gatsis.
Hmm,
Denali, let's talk about your book,
sure.
The Immortal Mask. I'm looking at two wonderful covers. I saw the mask cover a couple of weeks ago, and now I'm looking at this new cover here. Tell us about it.
Right, so the last time was actually like a week ago when we kind of like unveiled the Immortal Mask, which is the cover on the left, and the cover on the right is actually the unveiling of the heroine of the Immortal Mask.
Oh, very
So,
nice.
yes. So we have kind of giving you two flavors, what we're trying to bring to the story. And no, it's pretty slick, pretty awesome. I'm very happy with it.
Yeah,
And
tell us your elevator pitch.
well, the elevator pitch is simple. As a retired soldier down on his luck is given a covenant interview with a death row inmate. What he learns from the interview thrusts him into Atlanta's shadowy underworld. He'll have to utilize his military training to survive from being hunted for the information that could topple the most powerful ruling class in the city.
And
Um, and this
and
is,
go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, and this is set in this mid 70s Atlanta. So, it's crime noir, it's fun, um, it has a lot of action, a lot of humors. So, it has a lot of for everybody.
Wow. Okay. That's impressive. What
Mhm.
what's also impressive is that you say this gentleman is a soldier
Right, retired
and
soldier.
a
Yeah,
retired soldier. So I'm assuming it's the character on the left. So,
correct.
excuse me. So I would assume the character on the right is either an ally or an enemy.
Well, you gotta read to find out.
You got it. I heard you say that lots of times on the streams.
Yes.
Is there anything you can tell us at all? Just give us something.
Well, she's also on a mission, and their goals will and their interests will cross paths during the story. So I look forward to seeing how people react to their actions and how they interact with each other during the night.
I'm really excited what I'm looking at because it's not like any other comic book. Your values, your quality. It's it's sort of like Alex Ross. You're sort of like borderline photography, borderline Alex Ross, but it's all painted. This is a slick production here. Um, tell us about these artists that you have. I mean, where did you find them? How long did it take you to find them? Give us something about your production team.
Well, unfortunately, I can't do that because they're all under non-disclosure agreement, and because of that, I just want them to keep focus on working on the production of this book and not to worry about any troubles that the world might be bringing out, whether it's on social media or whether it's what's happening in real life kind of deal.
Which,
Um,
okay, I understand. So,
yeah.
for some people who don't know what an NDA is, why don't you enlighten us?
So NDA is a non-disclosure agreement. Basically, I have whoever works for me saying that they signed a contract saying that they can't say anything about if they're working or not working on the project. And if they do break the contract, then they're subject to monetary and legal fines, kind of deal. So it's just more of a protection for them and more to keep everyone away from my team, so they can just focus on working on the job. So they can always say, "Hey, I'm sorry, I have an NDA. I can't say anything."
Oh,
You know
very,
what? Yeah,
very nice.
compare. Yeah.
Very nice.
Um,
I'm assuming it's a well polished production team because I mean I'm looking at this stuff and your sense and sensibilities. Uh, I mean I'm assuming you're just not going to let them run freely with just going nuts with creativity. You have you have some sort of control over your artists.
Well, what I do is basically I have a vision, I have a style and tone that I want, and I gently guide them to where I want. I kind of give them, this is what I'm looking for, and I kind of let them do their job, what I hire them for. And if they continue going to the direction that I want them, then I kind of let them continue on until they reach a point where I say, no, this is not quite right, or we can do a little bit better and make those adjustments as needed. But I try them, not to be micromanaging them. Let them actually do the work and look at the overall picture to see, where it turns out.
Oh, very nice, very nice. I'm very curious. The process to get to this point. When did you start your idea, and how long did it take your idea to get to this point?
So I started 2018 with the idea. It started as the the assumption. Initial inspiration was a radio play. As I continued working on it, it outgrew that radio play, and I had to restart from the ground up, keeping the elements that liked and enjoyed, um, and getting rid of any other elements that I couldn't use or didn't really fit the concept and idea that I wanted. And I just, kind of like a forging of the sword, you kind of fold it in until, you have that nice slickness happening. And that's what I kind of did. It's, doing a process of folding, started with the concept idea, then fleshing that out to a treatment level, then fleshing that out to a highly detailed treatment level
Mm-hmm. Yes, yes.
until I got to a script kind of level. And it's always just a process. And it helps me because it's kind of like I mentioned in some previous stream, I'm more of a farmer where, I'm not managing just one thing like the crops, like a gardener or like a plotter. I'm kind of letting things grow organically, but I know what my crops are going to be, kind of deal. And I'm looking ahead. Um, I think a good analogy was Neil Gaiman. Neil Gaiman saying when you're writing the story, it's like you're walking in the fog and you're only seeing like about a foot in front of you, but you eventually happens. What I've done is I walked up the mountain over the fog to see where the tree is, and I'm kind of plotting. I'm kind of throwing the flagpoles to know where the direction I'm going in. So I'm not in that messy, oh, I'm lost fog. I'm always steadily going forward to my plot progression.
Oh, very nice, very nice. I'm assuming you're gonna be showing us some inside pages sometime soon, maybe.
Yeah, I'm very notorious about being secretive and waiting until those pages are perfect and polished. Um, we look at every detailed over these pages, and I always drive my artists crazy with my ideas and my comments. But the moment I feel we're ready to unveil it, it will be the moment that it'll be unveiled.
Ah, welcome, Rose. Welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Hello,
Oh,
Rose.
what's this? Oh my gosh, PJ, well, okay.
Hi guys, how are
Hi.
you?
Hey,
Rose.
PJ.
Good.
Hello,
I was just talking here to Denelli about his crime noir book, The Immortal Mask, and the unveiling of the second illustration.
Right. So,
Before we continue, Denali, you say the art in the book. Can you tell us a little bit about it? Is it gonna be the same quality as the cover, or are we gonna have something along the lines of, oh, here's a book, here's a really slick cover, and the inside is the art is like so.
no, it's going to be slick, like the front cover. I mentioned this, and I think I mentioned it during PJ's interview, so check out that 4-hour interview. That I'm the type of person that, when I see it on the shelf, I never like the covers that are slick and then the inside are, not as good. I rather, slick cover, slick insides. So what you see is it's the level of expectation you're going to get inside the book as well.
So we're gonna see art at the same quality as the covers.
Correct.
Wow, that's a tall order.
Well, never compromise in art.
Well, now that we have a full panel list here, I'd like to thank Rose for coming by and PJ, and let's start off the panel by asking if you had to survive the apocalypse in your pajamas, like we are all doing right now. What would you hold on to as entertainment to keep you sane, Rose?
Oh, well, I have several tarot decks that I use for storytelling purposes. So, and I've just been using those to entertain myself for years. So actually, quarantine as it is, there's not a lot that's different from my day-to-day life. So I feel like if we just took the next step apocalypse-wise, I'd still be fine.
Oh, so it's just business as usual.
It is business as usual for me.
Oh, that's fantastic. I'm in a similar thinking. Um, you wake up, you go to work where your computer is, and usually it's in another room in the same house. The commute is terrible, I tell you. It's terrible.
It's so rough. I know. This couch here, that's my bed. That folds out into bed, and getting from there to here so I can get writing done. It's absolute murder.
Wait a minute. Let's see. Where's this fancy gadget here?
Is
There we
Rose
go.
gonna read us cards or something?
I
today?
could if you want. I mean, I only use one deck for readings, but for storytelling purposes, I have all my other decks. I could just show you my decks.
Actually, that's very interesting. Can you please do that?
All right. So the deck that I use for giving
Cool.
readings is called the Tarot of the Saints. I am a Catholic. Sorry. But
It's okay. No one's perfect.
nobody's perfect. Even my church isn't perfect. I feel like I take the word Catholic more seriously than they do.
We all strive for perfection.
We all strive for something. So the Tarot of the Saints, it has a different saint for every pip and for every card in the major arcana, and then various cards throughout give different Bible scenes and images from Catholic mysticism, or well, that which survived of Catholic mysticism during the Inquisition, when everybody was just destroying all the grimoires. Jerk faces. This is a deck that I don't use much. I actually kind of found this one. Somebody was just getting rid of it, and it's all art by Gustav Klimt.
Wow.
And so very, very nice art there. I've been talking to my sister about maybe giving it to her because she really loves Klimt artwork. So that's that. And then I keep them all in the same spot for easy storytelling access. It's very important to keep your desk organized.
How many cards are in a deck?
78. So there are the 4 main suits like you would have in a standard deck of playing cards, only instead of having 3 pip cards, king, queen, and jack, you have 4 pip cards, which may be king, queen, prince, princess, or king, queen, knight, knave, or king, queen, knight, squire. It just depends on the art of the deck and what the artist was going for. So this deck is a fairy tale deck. So every single card is a different fairy tale.
But it's still the same number of cards.
It's the same number of cards. And they also have the info letting you know what card of the traditional deck that it would be. And all the cards have the same baseline meaning from one deck to the next. But the art influences how you would interpret it because you're doing your interpretation of the reading, not just on what the card basically means, which if you just want to do that, you could use the Rider-Waite traditional deck alone. But with these other decks, the particular little nuances that they put in as artists can influence what's going on in your reading, the relationship you have with the cards, which is a big part of the reason most of my decks are used for storytelling. And the Sainted one is the only one that I use really for proper readings because I have the best relationship with that one. It's the one that I've had the longest. I got it when I was 13. And then this one is by an artist named Kitty Kahane, or Kahane. I'm not sure on the pronunciation of her last name.
Can I pause for a moment?
Sure.
You said a couple of things that interest me. You said you have a relationship with the cards?
Yeah, because so this is what the Kitty Kahane deck looks like, the back of it, and what some of the cards inside look like. So divination, the traditional meaning of the word is that you are attempting communication with the divine. It's not about fortune telling. It's not about predicting the future. It's about getting a better read on what's going on at present. And so it's just kind of widening your perspective of what's going on at present. And so you're trying to have a dialogue with, get my other 2 out while I'm talking about this. Do I want to get that other? I don't like that one. Well, I'll get into that because we're talking about relationships with the cards. So
I guess you have a angry relationship with that deck.
I'm not angry with it. I'm disappointed in it. This is not a card.
How do you punish the cards? You just put them on the shelf and shun them?
No, it's not that I shunned it. It's just it doesn't hang out with my storytelling cards. It hangs out with other boxed books that I have over there. So it hangs out with like the Enchanted Forest Chronicles and the first 6 books of the Foresight Saga and some other books that are in little boxed sets. They're just all on a shelf together. And so I didn't know where else to put that deck because it doesn't entirely, it just doesn't, we'll get to it.
So I'm assuming that deck is very pristine. All the corners are sharp.
Yeah. This is the dirtiest deck because I have used it the most. You can see just that used to be white. And these decks are much cleaner, these storytelling ones, because I really only pull them out when I'm making a story outline. And even with storytelling with these decks, I'm doing all the shuffling using the Tarot of the Saints. And then I'm pulling out my other decks and I'm going through them to find the related cards in order to lay them out and figure out how I'm outlining a book. So I crocheted this too tight. So with divination, it's about divine communication. So in any dialogue, you have to develop a relationship there. So you just get really familiar with a particular deck. And each of my decks, most decks that have a lot of art involved in them come with a really dense book. I was just doing my weekly tarot reading, so I had this book out, which is the one that came with the Tarot of the Saints. It's the Gnostic Book of Saints. And so you just get really, like, you can even see the book itself is dirty right there from how much I've thumbed through it.
Well, that's interesting, because I remember sometimes going to church, and the pastor would be introduced to somebody new at the church, and he would usually look at the Bible that they have on hand, and if he sees the Bible's really worn down, he knows.
Yeah.
He knows there's a little dedication there.
Yeah.
As opposed to a Bible that's got the creases so perfect.
Oh,
yeah.
That kills me. That kills me when a book has, like, as much as I love a brand new book, like that first opening of it, it should be the first opening. There should be, like, you should feel the history of a book being well loved.
Yes.
Kills me when you don't get that. So when you have like different relationships with the different decks that I've gotten at different points in my life. Which tarot deck was this one for? Why do I? Because okay, Rose, you over.
Well, I'm curious. The way you say it helps you write a story. So I'm assuming this is not like Go Fish, where you just shuffle 3 cards and the 4th card is something. There's a technique to this. There's a procedure.
There's a couple different. All right, so I'm going to back up so I can show you. All right. So there are 2 different methods of dealing out cards that I do when I'm using them for storytelling purposes. All right. So the first is where you're doing, that one's more complicated. I'm going to do the simple one. This is the one that I do for both readings for getting through the week.
Rose, you can get complicated.
All right, we're getting complicated. That's what's happening now. Holy Chris.
Arcana fusion.
I'm digging this. I'm digging this, Rose.
Wait, hold a sec. Denali, do you have any questions?
No, I'm familiar with a lot of the arcanas because oddly enough, I've been playing a lot of Persona games, so they've really introduced me into what those arcanas are all about, kind of deal.
Right, they have a lot to do with a lot of familiar folk archetypes and psychological archetypes that we deal with in the world and in storytelling. So they're coming up in the tarot, and the tarot there's a really great history actually in this book of Gnostic Book of Saints, a really great history of how it started off as card games. And then because the art was so rich, then they started associating meaning with it. And because so many of the cards are numbered, particularly in the minor arcana, the 4 standard suits, sacred geometry and the sacred mathematics found in the Kabbalah really determined a lot of what the numbers in the tarot deck ended up meaning. But those associations came from other cultures, and they were just applied to the decks that were originally a kind of game of trumps, which is actually one of the words that has been used for the major arcana in the past, when it was just a game deck, was referring to it as the suit of trumps, because each card in the major arcana is numbered and trumps the previous.
Wow. Oh, we just lost her. Everybody.
Well, you lost everybody.
No, I'm still here.
No, we just lost Rose.
Oh, okay.
There you go, Rose.
I don't know what happened. Silly technology. All right. So the numbers in the major arcana would trump the one over the other, with the Fool being both the least powerful and most powerful card as the unnumbered card from the major arcana.
That's watching you shuffle that deck so perfectly. Have you actually played poker with anybody?
Oh, yeah, my dad taught us to play poker on the footrest when we were kids. We had a big jar of pennies we kept on the mantelpiece, and whenever he was in the mood to play poker, he'd pull out the pennies, and we'd all play poker together.
Yeah, you just don't get a shuffle like that from a beginner.
No. Also, so tarot deck cards, the cards are actually a little bit longer in order to make them easier to shuffle because the deck is so much thicker than a 52-card deck.
Uh-huh.
With those additional 24 cards from the additional 4 pips plus or 26 cards, not 24 cards, 4 pips, and then the 26, the 22 major arcana. I can speak the words goodly. All right. So the complicated deal out that I do for storytelling. Am I going to have any pictures of this somewhere that I could share? All right. This is going to get slightly finicky. Unless, oh no, well, I'll show you how I do the shuffle. Then I can pull out some cards that I have to show you how I arrange them. All right.
Okay.
So first I actually split the deck into 3 piles of approximately 26 so that I'm shuffling 52 at a time. And then
just listening to that creasing sound from the cards, that's just a video by itself,
I have heard that many times before. All right, so you shuffle a couple times those 2. So that everything gets mixed up along the line.
Yeah. What are the odds that after all the shuffling, all the cards actually align themselves perfectly in order?
Oh, that would be ridiculous. I mean, mathematically, there is a probability of that happening eventually, but I can't do that calculation. There's a lot of calculations I can do. Ask me about the epic poem I may or may not ever write. But I can, there is a mathematical probability of that happening. It's just not terribly high. So then each of these get cut with the top half being put on the bottom. And then I draw a card from each one.
This process, this technique, did you learn it from a mentor or?
No, I made this up.
Okay.
Yeah. So I was looking at it in terms of trying to figure out 3 chapter character progressions. So I had watched a documentary on the recipe Agatha Christie used that underlines all of her novels, and so the little tips and tricks of how she kept things moving, but then was able to create incredibly rich, unique stories every single time, even with this baseline information that she was always hitting in each book. And one of those baseline things is that she always had 9 characters for you to focus on, because when your brain has 9 things to focus on, that's the right sort of mental tripwire that when you hit it, you kind of go into a semi-meditative or semi-hypnotized state. So
Really?
by introducing 9 characters pretty quickly at the start of her book, she gets her readers into a meditative hypnotic state to just kind of get pulled through the story. So I had this idea of drawing up 3 cards, making a note of them, of what those 3 cards are, putting them back in, doing the shuffle again, drawing 3 more cards, and always trying in the next round of whatever next round of shuffling came up, that one of those 3 cards would also be one of the 3 cards that one of the previous of the 9 characters had, so that there's all this intersecting going on. And I'm sure I have a picture of one of the charts I've made to do this in the past. In fact, I'm sure it's on Facebook because I was doing a lot of this one summer and just like outlined 7 books and then never wrote any of them.
Wow.
So, but someday I will. Every project I come up with, eventually I do it. I just have to actually get to the thing. All right, so going to Facebook to see if I can find that picture. But yeah, the 2 other decks that I pulled that are here at the desk are my Druidcraft Tarot, which has imagery from Druidry.
Very
And
interesting.
There's this artist who does fairy art named Ravencraft, I think her name is. And so she did a tarot deck. And actually the way she did the deck is that each of the 4 main suits, when you go through those cards, tells a story. It's a really beautiful, wonderful deck. Huge fan of it.
You're a fascinating young lady, Rose.
I try. I like to blame my OCD because like when I get interested in something, I sink my teeth all the way the hell in.
Very nice.
All right.
Have you considered making your own deck?
Sort of. Yes and no. So I'm not totally visually adept, but I actually 2019, 3 people I love dearly unfortunately passed 1 month apart over the summer. And I started getting into the habit of I was dealing tarot cards to myself and writing prayers associated with those tarot cards. And it was one of the few things that I made that was actually new over the course of the summer. Like it was the one creative outlet that I was actually working on. And so I've actually worked all the way through the Tarot of the Saints deck, wrote a prayer for each one. And so I'm actually going to make that into, I know I have more pictures than this technology. So I'm going to make that into a deck of I'm calling it my book of stubborn prayer. And
Why do you call it that?
Because I was a stubborn ass and I'm like, I'm going to write a prayer for every fucking card.
That's the spirit.
Yeah, I just made it happen. And because I needed to be doing something. And that was what I did. And now I have a little, not all of the prayers have titles to them. So I'm still working on titling them and figuring out exactly what the format would be for the cards. Because as Denalis was saying, you know, you want that consistent level of quality throughout the thing that you have made. You don't just want to make this promise on the cover and that's not held throughout the whole thing.
Yes.
I mentioned before that I have the boxed set of the Enchanted Forest Chronicles. It's a bit of a letdown because the cover art was not made by somebody who has read this series. They got notes on what the characters are like, but then completely missed like little character details. Like the main character, Cimarine, when she is adventuring, when she goes out adventuring, she has very long hair and she braids it into a crown so that it stays off of her face and off the back of her neck. And they did this like weird Viking ponytail thing that, no, that's not Cimarine. Just not at freaking all.
Wow. I mean that's an acute detail, and for those kind of little details, I'm assuming, you know, cover artists would be slaves to the editor. You know, they would say, yeah, it's one thing to hire a cover artist. It's another thing to ask them to read an entire text so they can get the feel of it. So maybe the editor would have been the person who really let down,
Yeah.
that quality of the production.
Yeah, whoever was at fault, dude, people who love this series know that that cover art, and it's all like the Enchanted Forest Chronicles very much has that aesthetic of like modern day sensibility, but in a very storybook fairy tale world, and you don't get that from the cover at all. It's too akin to like there's it's too rough. It's just doesn't fit. And every time I look at it, my brain's like, oh, why did you do this to me?
Well, let me do an image search. Give me the name of the book again.
The Enchanted Forest Chronicles. I just found a picture of one of the story layouts. So I'm going to share screen here.
Enchanted.
All right.
Okay, I misspelled. I got Enchanted. I got Forest. What else am I missing?
The Enchanted Forest Chronicles.
Chronicles. Everybody's going to look at my terrible spelling, and they'll see.
Google will figure it out.
Yeah. So which one of these covers is
Okay, so that very first one.
right here?
Yeah, that's the same artist who did and then that's the artwork of the offending version of the series.
Oh, let's zoom in.
Like
here.
it's beautiful, but when you know the story, and
Nice cover.
like that moment is supposed to be when she's meeting Kazul, and there's a lot of attitude there that wasn't actually in the moment where they met, where she's like got her arms crossed and like every way that she's posturing. You have to understand, when she met Kazul because a marriage was being arranged between her and a prince who was annoying, and she was alone in the castle grounds, and she said to herself, I'd rather be eaten by a dragon. And a frog said to her, that could be arranged. Did not ask for a kiss, just said, that could be arranged, and told her where she could go find dragons. So she went to look for a dragon to go eat her so that she wouldn't have to marry this guy. And then they started talking like these, because Kazul is a female dragon. Like, we're actually not super interested in eating humans. You're always wearing something that gets stuck in our teeth. It's just more hassle than it's worth. But they start talking, and she's revealing all this stuff about herself, that she knows how to cook Cherry's Jubilee, and she knows how to make swords, and she knows all this stuff. She's an awesome, badass princess. And the dragon's like, I have a cauldron of plenty, and it doesn't quite work. It can't do dessert. And I love Cherry's Jubilee. Why don't you just come live with me and be the princess of my cave? And Simran's like, okay. And that's how the series starts. It's so good.
It sounds like there's a lot of metaphor here.
There is so much. So, oh yes. And here is what it ends up looking like when I do these tarot outlines. So the 3 across is one character, and then you have 3 across is another character's arc, with their arc ending halfway through this character's arc. And so there's all this overlap. And actually these 5 cards in a row is because this last card starts off this trio and ends this trio.
Holy smokes.
Wow.
Yeah. So
I gotta say, you're blowing me away here, Rose.
Yeah, me too. Denelli, how about you?
I'm just absorbing it all in.
Let me pull it back just for a moment.
yeah.
Denelli, the Immortal Mask that you're working on has a lot of Christian metaphors. Am I assuming correctly?
Yeah, there's a lot of Christians ideas and themes in there as well.
Now, the process that you went through, to write your story, is there a formula to what? Because right now, just for the people who are viewing this, and even for myself, I'm looking at here is such a unique formula process to crafting a story, and I just want to have a contrast, compare that to your experience, Denali, which is you just went through the standard screenwriters regimen. And can you just give us a quick outline of how you came to write the story, create your stories?
Again, it started out with basically the overall theme of what I'm writing about. I asked myself the questions, and then I started jotting down, okay, what happens next? And basically, I start with one storyline, which is one character, and I go through each act, and then I go back to the next character and do the same thing for all each characters. And I make kind of like build a time frame, a timeline of where these characters are in every moment of the story, whether I'm writing that main story or whether they're doing something else. So even if I can't include it in that particular story, when they appear, it makes sense. It's just that the reader won't know why they appear that time, and that's just another opportunity to tell that story as well. So, yeah.
Okay, and now having a point of reference, Rose, tell us about this unique process that you're outlining for us, and highlight where the difference is. Yeah, I mean, this is absolutely fascinating.
So this is just trying to outline the order that things are happening in, because when you're following one hero's journey, you're getting their arc, you're getting the shift that they're making. And the thing is, human nature dictates that we are all growing and all shifting and all changing at all times. So the way the story works is that it's focusing in on these, and this is, so what you're looking at here is 9 characters overlapping, which means that some character stories are going away. You're not focusing them as you're getting farther on, which I ended up changing for when I was working on, okay. So all those decks that I showed you, I have cards pulled from different decks to represent different characters, 3 characters that I did that process for. So they would all overlap a little differently. I don't have a picture of what that looks like. I have the outline of it drawn somewhere.
Okay.
But in this one, it's just about each card is, in this modality, each card is a different chapter in the story.
Wow.
And then in each chapter is focusing on, depending on where it came up in a character's arc and how it intersects with somebody else's arc, that's what that chapter is focusing on. So it's starting one chapter. So on here, there's the Ace of Cups, which was kind of sitting off on its own because it's only touched on by one character. And then where's the card that's hit by multiple storylines at once? All right. So the Six of Swords is the start of a storyline, is the start of 2 storylines for somebody.
And where's that in the deck?
That's this upper corner here.
Okay.
The mother protecting her child.
Uh-huh.
And then next to her is Saint Francis the Fool, which is the second in this 3-card arc, but also the start of this 3-card arc. And then Saint Lawrence ends this arc and starts a new arc. And then Saint Michael and Saint George are the second and third of this first arc, but then they are the first and second of this arc here, which ends with the 10 of Cups. And so everybody's at different points in their journeys is what this was meant to illustrate. So, but because I was doing it with 3 cards to 9 different people, and then their stories are intersecting, that's more a series of short stories I've come to realize in terms of planning that out, and how those stories intersect and give way to new stories, so that you're not by the end of the story thinking, well, wait, why am I down here with this character's arc where the hell did this person go from the very start of the book? So it just helps me to get those things in a kind of an order, but it didn't give me a through line, which is part of the reason this book ended up not, well, actually this was the first act of a play, so it was, but it was going to be a whole thing. But now the project is shifting because once I got started in it, working on this particular timeline, the nature of the work shifted.
Okay, I got a question. You know, since you shuffle the deck and you put the cards down, do you cheat in any way, saying, you know what, I don't like the way this arc is going. Maybe I'll cheat and tweak it a little and stuff like that, or you do actually religiously, and not in a non-faith
No, I
way?
know what you mean. Am I strict with myself and make sure that I follow the line that I dealt?
I was trying to ask that question very nicely.
You know, it's fine. Like being strict with yourself, being disciplined. And that's part of the reason this particular project that I was showing has not happened as yet, is because the way that I was approaching it before, in order to achieve this storyline that I've mapped out, I would need to change the number of characters. I would need to change really who's going on these journeys, not the journey itself. And so this is more just the framework that I'd be building on top of and finding the right characters to suit the story, rather than changing the cards around. When it comes to making a storyline more fluid, so in this dealing that I showed you, the characters are what starts off fluid, and the outline is what's very rigid. The other reading that I do, which is very straightforward, is I'm just doing a shuffle, and I'm doing it for more short stories when I'm writing fairy tales, is that the storyline is loose, but the characters are more rigid because the cards are telling you what their character development needs to be. So you deal 3 cards that represent the 3 fairy tale virtues of kindness, intelligence, and right work. Then you deal a card representing the challenge that this character has to go through, and you deal a card telling you the lesson that they will learn from it. So then you're working on, well, what story gets you through, takes those 3 virtues that are the character, gets them over this hurdle and to this lesson. So then the storyline is a little more, is looser and can arise more naturally out of that. Whereas this is more the opposite, because the outline is deciding who is in this story.
Wow. I mean, like, wow. Okay. Why I say this is because sometimes, me personally, when I write a story, I get to a point where everything is very comfortable, and it just doesn't. It doesn't feel. It doesn't feel good. So I would actually flip a coin and say, is this character gonna do this or that? Is this character gonna live or die? And I would stick to it. Whatever the coin flip was, I would stick to it. And sometimes it really just really makes me upset. But I say, you know what? I made the choice, and whatever the coin flip was, that's what I'm sticking with.
Yeah.
And I've done that on not constantly, but sometimes. Sometimes, and it's a very weird feeling to actually. Lack of a better description, I would say I felt like Two-Face from Batman. Should I kill Batman or not? You flip the coin, and you go, "Oh darn! I'm not going to kill Batman, even though I got him chained up. I got his utility belt. There's no way he's going to escape me. I can finally get rid of him once and for all and go on my crime spree. But the coin says I can't kill him today.
Yeah.
Darn."
Well, I mean, that's a really great way of introducing something that feels more real to a storyline. It's like, I don't like that this is what's going, but I mean, that's what it is in real life. Things come along you don't have to deal with, but that's where it is. And so you're effectively introducing that in the realm of the story. It's like, oh, fine, we're not doing this now, we'll do it later. Like, it introduces reality to the story in really interesting ways. So I have done things like that where if I'm stuck with the story, I will deal myself one card. And if I don't like that one card, I don't deal a new card, but I do look at what that card means in my other decks, because there are nuances of meaning from one deck to the next.
Whoa, really?
Yeah. So just little shift in things. So part of the reason I have the relationship that I have with the Tarot of the Saints deck is because the whole point of the deck being based on Catholic mysticism is that what all mystics strive for is enlightenment, is gnosis. So all the cards, their meanings are skewed slightly. They all have the same base meaning as any other tarot deck, but they have these details to them that are always trying to help you move towards spiritual growth. And
Rose, is that, forgive me if I may have missed it, does that have anything to do with Santeria? Or do you know what that is? Or
I'm not as familiar with the term Santeria.
No, it wouldn't.
Oh, like the worship of like saints as mystical entities.
Yeah.
Right.
It's kind of like, yeah.
So there is an element of treating the saints as mystical entities, but in the Santeria, kind of with that mystical entities, it's like they're demigods. But with Catholicism, you're not supposed to view them as demigods. But you know what? There's lots of saints who weren't actually people. So what were they? I mean, when I went through confirmation, I chose the name of Bridget after the Irish goddess who was turned into a saint, specifically because she was originally an Irish goddess and I was being snarky. But all right, so if I pull, I'll pull the book for Fairy Tale Tarot and the book for the Tarot of the Saints. And Saint Gabriel is judgment. And the tarot card tells us that this card is a call to a higher state of being. On a worldly level, this card signifies calling up the past, making decisions based on experience, or simply reminiscing. It can also refer to revitalizing parts of ourselves that we have blocked or denied, given that at the Judgment Day, things were being risen from the dead. In the Tarot of the Saints, not the Tarot of the Saints, I just read Tarot of the Saints, the fairy tale, story tale. We have Snow White and the Seven Dwarves. This is, again, awakening to new life, rebirth, and renewal, finding an alternative way of living, feeling refreshed and rehabilitated because she was effectively asleep, but also dead, womp womp. Putting the past behind you, going on to a whole new existence, shaking off guilt or regret, and realizing that today is the first day of the rest of your life. But there's a big difference between looking at the story of Snow White waking up after the princess kissed her and looking at Saint Gabriel blowing his horn. There's just knowing those two stories, knowing those two images calls up different connotations, calls up different feelings when you're dealing with that story. So the card is giving you a piece of information to put into your story, but you have different ways of viewing that information because two different people are giving you their different perspectives of that information.
Whoa. You just described something that's, you have like the King James Bible, then you have the International Edition, the Expanded Edition.
Oh, yeah. Different Bible translations. Me and Grandma were big nerds about Bible translations. Oh, man. She really liked the King James one because she liked that they specifically were trying to make the language more poetic. I was really annoyed by the these and thous in there because she said it made it more poetic, but it's like, that's not what thee and thou mean. Thee and thou are familiar pronouns. It's meant to make God feel more familiar, but because those pronouns are now out of use, it doesn't feel familiar. It feels disconnected. If we went back into a practice of using thee and thou for talking to somebody that we know personally, it would make sense. There would be beauty to it. But if you don't have that information, it feels like somebody's being uppity, and that's not happening at all.
Yep.
You know that's interesting because give me a second, Lily.
Sure.
These and thous would be actually a very happy thing for the what do you call it?
The Quakers?
Yeah, the people, the left winging thinking people who say I identify as a they, I identify as non-binary and all that stuff.
Wouldn't work because these and thous are more male pronouns.
Well, there you go.
Thine.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Thou, thine, thy. It's a Germanic twist on the pronoun of you. Thee, thou. You is familiar because of that was the familiar way of doing it in Old English. Old English, that ye was formal, and thee and thou was familiar. Just like in Italian, you would say lei with a capital L to you to be formal, or you would say tu or ti to be informal. So it was a Germanic crossing of what was going on in the Romantic languages to say thee and thou as the familiar pronoun, the familiar you pronouns. With regards to being non-binary, as someone who actually is non-binary, my gender is neighbor, again, it wouldn't thrill me because I'm non-binary. I like the idea of having familiar pronouns. I do, but we've gotten so far past that usually in terms of formalizing language, we use more general terms we use more sort of general group terms rather than pronouns for formalizing language. So we're saying gentlemen, ladies, neighbors as a way of making something more formal rather than the informal of saying you, which is a one-on-one dialogue, regardless of who you're talking to. So there is something nice looking back historically on the formal and informal ways of saying you, but at the same time, our language has evolved because we're trying to get past classism and we're trying to get past not seeing each other as equals. And so having you as the second person pronoun is is incredibly unifying, and actually non-binary people really like the word you for that reason.
Well, that's very interesting. So now that so you've gone through the process of shuffling and laying out the cards. What happens next?
So then I would make a chart that looks at those replicating those cards information, and I would make notes about those cards. I would go through my other decks to pull the notes from those cards information to see what is different and what is overlapping, so that in terms of choosing character profiles. So as I said before, I have a story here. I really freaking love this story, and I really want to get back to this story. I did it actually as 3 characters with 3 arcs, 3-ish arcs each, with the 9 overlap again. So you'd have like these 3 little arcs, all creating one larger arc for each character. And so for each of the characters' various arcs, I have pulled from the decks the cards that I feel represent them. So I use the Druidcraft deck for the character, for the older sister's character. Is her name still Janie? Crap. I keep changing her name. Her name changes all the time. Nobody else's names change. Hers does all the time. One of the reasons the book isn't getting written. But Druidcraft cards are for her, just the incredible femme priestess power going on in it, which I feel is very important to her character development. Then I use the Kitty Kahane Tarot for her younger sister, Beth, who is actually a ghost and stuck at the start of the book quoting Ghostbusters, and that's the only way she can communicate. And so it's a fun it's a fun deck, but she calls it the magic mirrors or mystic mirrors, this deck. So the way that it is just a reflection of things. And I really liked it for Beth's character. And then Taylor, Beth's werewolf crush, who it's really hard to get your flirt on when nobody can see you, let me tell you. For her, I used the fairy deck, where each suit is a different story about a different fairy tale pair of friends or lovers, as the case may be, given the suit. And, yeah.
Okay. Let me just add. I don't want to diminish what you're saying, but I mean, it sounds like, choose your own adventure kind of thing, but on a grander scale. Because right now I'm just trying to wrap my head around this, because it's brand new to me. I've never experienced what you have just said, the process and all that stuff, and it's absolutely fascinating. And I'm trying to, in my own small way, trying to grasp all this. And okay, here's an example. I play a game called Clash Royale,
Mm-hmm.
and what you do is you just put a little game characters onto the screen, and they walk, north, and if they encounter other game characters from the opposite side, they would fight. And so it's basically the way the game is programmed is you just release this little character, he'll walk north, and if he encounters a castle, he'll try to break the castle. If he encounters anybody within his area of influence, he'll attack the opposing characters. And you're basically watching this whole thing play out. You have some sense of control by releasing these characters in certain places, and that's the strategy behind this game. But here, it's like it's so many levels above that. It's ridiculous. I mean, you've done the setup, the layout, and all that stuff, and then when you start shuffling, I mean, not shuffling in terms of the cards, you already did that. The process of you actually translating everything and putting it into a coherent story. I mean, wow. I mean, how long does this whole process take? I mean, it's definitely, it doesn't sound like it's, a weekend.
Of putting the storyline together?
Yeah. I mean, from the moment you shuffle the cards to the moment you have a finished manuscript.
Okay, now there's the thing, is the writing the manuscript part. Because...
Okay, let's forget about the manuscript. Let's say you're at the beginning of writing the manuscript.
All right.
How long was that for?
From shuffling the cards to writing the outline for the book.
Yes.
Well, I think the longest it's taken is about a week. The shortest it's taken is a day.
Wow.
But I came up with this because it felt right to me. So I was pulling it out of what instinctually was already working for me, storytelling wise and thinking ahead wise. And so it's arising out of the fact that I'm able to do it is kind of arising out of my nature. That's why it makes it seem like I'm talking about it, and it seems so easy to me, and it seems so out there to use, because it just...
I've never experienced it before like this. Is this something? Okay, you said something else interesting. It's like you developed this for yourself.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming they're saying that. I'm assuming one of two things. There's similar ways of doing what you said, but in different flavors or different techniques.
Well,
styles.
every book you get, every time you buy a tarot deck, and it comes with a book that tells you about the deck and also how to use the deck, it gives you the recommended modality of dealing out the cards. And I have heard people, just what we were talking before about pulling one card from the deck and what that card represents in terms of action. You put that into your story. You find a way to just make it work. And then I built on that by saying, okay, well, I'll do an action, but I'm have all these other decks, so I'll see what the same card means in all my other decks to see how I could have other people relating to that action or doing that action themselves. Like, so then I have more options around this one card. And then because I was getting more in the habit of seeing each individual card as a piece of action, then, the laying out of a row of cards to get a storyline, like the 5-card draw that I did, which is actually a very new draw that I developed for myself early last year that I call the Fairy Godmother spread, because it's the 3 virtues, then the challenge, then the lesson. I got used to putting like 3 cards out in order to get that general arc structure, beginning, middle, end. And then just knowing that we're all at different stages in our lives. We're not all going through whatever arc we happen to be going through at the same time as somebody else is going through their arc. Like, they're not perfectly parallel. In fiction, they are often written as being parallel, but the really interesting stories are the ones where the end of your journey is the beginning or middle of mine. And so just thinking on that is where I got the idea of having all those 3-card structures just intersecting like a crossword puzzle. So it just sort of developed over time in little steps, from looking at all the different tarot spreads that are drawn up in the back of the books when they're telling you, here's how you can deal the cards. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. I'll do it at least once because you told me to, but then I'm doing it my way, which is now how I have, how many decks is this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 decks.
And these different decks, you chose them for a specific reason, and I'm assuming you didn't just go get them all in one day.
No, I didn't get them all at one day. The first deck I got when I was 13, when I first moved to Delaware and Borders was still around. I happened to go.
Borders.
Wait. For the audience who may be playing this back one day, what is this Borders thing you speak of?
Borders was a chain bookstore with a crap children's section. I really believe that the children's section of a bookstore tells you whether or not that bookstore is going to survive. It's a personal theory, but so far it's held true. Barnes & Noble has a beautiful children's section. Beautiful. Always has. Putting these away. Is everything going where it belongs? Yes, everything's going where it belongs. We are cool. Coolsies. So I got I can't remember the order I got I used to keep them arranged in the order that I got them, and then I stopped doing that because it didn't feel right. And you have to respect your relationship with your cards, la-di-da. So I stopped doing that. But my first deck, this one that I got when I was 13, and it was actually kind of ballsy that I got it because, oh man, the face my mother made when I brought it up to the register. I was trying to sneak it in and just pay for it myself without her seeing, and then she saw it and she got it for me, which was bizarre and amazing.
Oh, she didn't think it was witchcraft?
No, we're more liberal than that. She looked at the deck and she said, that's not real, right? That's not real. Like, she was thinking of it in terms of fortune telling. And since having had the deck and lived with it for so long, and knowing it's not fortune telling. Like, the only thing that is really predictive about it is the element of human behavior. That human behavior is predictable. If you behave in certain ways, you're going to achieve certain outcomes. And that is something that the deck reminds you of, but it does not predict what's going to happen. You predict what's going to happen based on your actions because you set off a domino effect every time you do something. So, So she ended up getting me this deck, and then I was fearless about going to the section of the bookstore where they sell tarot decks. and I would look at them and I would look at the art, and they were all so beautiful. And it would just be anytime I was passing the shelf and I saw something that I could not take my eyes off of, that was how I picked my decks, was behold to me. So that's how I got each of my decks, except the one that I don't like. That one was a gift. That one was a gift.
Now, I think I might have missed this. How are you applying this to a project that you're working on right now?
Oh, okay. So that's the 5-card draw that I do with the 3 fairy tale virtues of kindness, intelligence, and right work, the challenge that the character with those virtues has to overcome, and the lesson they will learn overcoming that challenge. And so that 5-card draw is what I'm applying actually to. I can say this all the way through. Maybe not with a straight face, but I can say it. On PJ's Orville Nation stream, I mentioned that I am working on a experimental radio play memoir told by loosely joining together fairy tales. That's what I'm applying it to.
Very, very cool.
So, yeah,
now,
it's a weird book, but I'm having fun.
And when might we see some of that? If ever.
Well, I just finished reading Mary Carr's Art of Memoir to help get my head screwed on straight that I am, in fact, allowed to do whatever the hell I want in my memoir, including make it just like thinly veiled stream of fairy tale. Rather than stream of consciousness, stream of fairy tale. How long would that take? There is one outlining thing I need to do in order to give myself a timeline with that, and that is actually this is going to be real upbeat. Get ready for this, fellas. This outlining thing I need to do is actually make a chronological list of the various points in my life when I have gone through a period of suicidal ideation, because the memoir is about me learning to not hate myself. Okay. And consistently not ending my life because I chose not to and continue to choose not to. So telling that so I have to make a list of those different instances, give myself a brief outline of them so I can kind of figure out how I'm going to do an overlay of fairy tale for each portion of the overall memoir.
Well, let me just say that what an amazing, beautiful, bright light you are to all of us, and you have to respect and take care of yourself. So,
thank you very much for saying that. I appreciate it very much. One thing I already know is going to happen in this memoir, and I got the idea from another memoir about depression and suicidal ideation that I was reading, was that on the bottom of every single page is going to be the phone number for the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. So because you never know at what point in your story you are triggering somebody else. And so that information needs to be immediately available at all times. They have it like buried at the back of the book, which isn't actually helpful if in the middle of the book you're having a panic attack and you don't know where to turn.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one thing I'm really looking forward to in terms of just like the physical manifestation of the book, or digital rather, either way.
Well, I think that's whole thing, all that is a tremendous public service, Rose.
Well, that's part of what's prompting me to do it is a lot of mental health healing you have to first get over other people's stigma of it and the shame of it, which we as a society kind of owe to each other, to be more open in those dialogues so that we can normalize the conversation, and in normalizing it, make it easier for people to ask for the help that they need. And so every time somebody does share their story, thinly veiled or not, you're helping to make it easier for people to have those conversations, to talk about what they're going through, and to seek those resources. So the book would be part of keeping those conversations going, keeping the normalizing progress going, and also just as having that continuous reminder, if you need anything, ask for it. Please, for the love of God, ask for it.
Yeah. And by the way, we should also remind anybody who's watching that going through low points for people who are going through low points, it's not something designated to certain types of individuals, even though some people might go through it more than others, but everybody goes through it at some point, and at probably several points in their lives. It's just not talked about. So yeah, removing the stigma is very important. And apart from depression and all that stuff we're talking about, I am proud to call George Peter Gatsis my friend because he's totally bonkers. So.
Yeah, God bless the bonkers ones.
That was very interesting. I gotta say, I did not see that coming, Rose. That's very interesting. Wow.
As I said before, I try.
That was a lot to take in. Wow. I don't know. Any thoughts on that, Denali?
Well, normally I would try to understate it with something clever, but clever just went out the window. Maybe Wit will find him. But no, I mean, it kind of pulls back thoughts of what I've experienced, not per se as depression and suicidal ideation, but also the person behind the phone and dealing with people in crisis, and kind of navigating that sort of situation as well. Kind of telling the person who has the ideas, there is a tomorrow. This is just a moment of time. Take a deep breath, allow your emotion to drain from you, kind of deal. So you can have a better clarity of what's going on. And I remember those kind of crisis center conversations saying, look, you are loved, you are cherished, you are not just affecting yourself, but you're affecting everybody around you, your circle. You're affecting your circle as well. And, this will not just affect yourself externally, internally, but it'll affect, also your family, your friends, your coworker. There's a magnitude of such effects that such ideas people don't really consider, because in that moment of self-loathing and isolation, they can't see the fog around them. So no, it's kind of just listening to Rose talk about it, it's kind of remind me, those long conversation, hours long conversation, to kind of throw the that rope lifeline and say, no, we care about you, we're here for you. Stay on the phone, tell me if you're feeling okay, tell me if you're, what's going on, what are you doing tomorrow, what's your favorite food, what do you like to eat, what is your favorite color, tell me you're
And
happy.
also reminding them that they made the call. The fact that they made a call means that they have something in them that wants to live. So yeah, like everything you're saying about like what's your favorite food and what's your favorite flower, like talking about those things that made them, that actually did help drive them already to be making the call in the first place, because there's a part of them that does want to live and to lean into that desire.
Right. And that's everybody, they have the desire to live. It's just that it's basically learning, it's building the pillars to handle that sort of emotion. And some people, those emotions are so intense, so abrupt, that it's kind of hard to manage those emotions without that external help. But they, like you mentioned, making those national calls, reaching out for help, discussing, having the conversation is always the important, because that's them, saying, hey, I need to let these feelings that are eating inside me out, in a way, kind of deal.
Yeah. Seth Godin had a really great quote on his blog a couple years ago where he said that a problem you can't talk about is now two problems. And when you talk about something, you're able to define what its edges are. And once you know what its edges are, you can actually work to make it smaller and smaller by bringing in those edges. And it's then, I mean, the long-term work is maintaining those edges. And that's something that I'm still learning. And partly why I'm writing the memoir is so that I basically have for myself a roadmap of, we've done this before. We've done it a couple of times before. So we'll get through it this time, which is why I'm writing it, is because I can feel my brain actually being on the verge of suicidal ideation right now. And so, I've been through this before and I know that I'll get through it again. And I'm just giving myself this roadmap so that I know, like, this is what we do. This is how we get through it. And then when we have this roadmap actually hammered out, now we can really begin the work of reining it in altogether.
Right. And that's very important. That's a key element that a lot of people, especially the crisis worker, says, learn what causes, what basically, for the lack of a better word, triggers these emotions. So if this happens, what's coming, so you're better, more in guard and prepare for what's going to come. It's going to come like a wave in the beach, but like the wave is going to recede back, and that's going to be that's all you have to do is just hold on until the wave goes back, and then you move away to a higher ground kind of deal. So no, it's very important. I think a lot of people who decides that they can't, it's just they don't get that help as needed, don't have the roadmap as needed. So those are very important tools for a lot of people to have access with. But the key factor is always recognizing, the moment you feel that lane, that, oh no, I hit that lane. Let me take a moment to breathe, to leave the area, so I can hopefully calm down, and then just recognize, reflect, and say, what is it about that situation that caused this panic and flight situation, and kind of overcome that. So the next time you come to the same situation, you're dealing, oh, okay, I recognize it, why it caused it. It's really nothing at this time. I have overcome it, and I can move forward beyond it. Kind of deal. It's like you said, breaking every problem into small, manageable size, and little by little you crumble that wall, that barrier, that situation, until you can manage it easily without any that panic inducing
without overexerting yourself. Like,
exactly.
Oh, I've got this. I've got the gears in motion for how to take care of this.
Yeah. So, no, very important.
Yeah.
George, anything to say? Yeah. I'm totally shocked. Mind blown. Taking it all in.
Oh no, I broke George.
See. Oh no, I think he did break George.
Oh, no.
He went bonker.
Oh no. How did we get started on all this?
Yeah.
Going backwards, I was asked
about
tarot. But where did the tarot come from? Where did that question even happen?
Well, I think it was conversation about the differences about how we outline and develop our stories. Your method was using tarot cards.
Yeah, that's one of the ones that's one of the that's what I use for anything that is overtly fairy tale related, or I make it overtly fairy tale related because I'm Rosie. That's when I pull out the tarot cards. But most projects, it really depends on the project. Like, depends on the project.
Depends on the project. Okay, fair enough. I mean, And then you have different cards for different characters, if I
Yeah.
recall correctly. And depending on what the situation calls for, you look at what the tarot card says, and then you look at the different definition to make it more applicable to the story that you are trying to tell.
Yeah, there's all sorts of different ways you can use a tarot deck or multiple tarot decks to help coax you if you're feeling stuck in any storytelling that you're doing.
Right. So, and then we did segued into translation because of that of
Yeah.
what we mentioned, which was basically the analogy was the New King's version with the international version. I was about to say before George interrupt me was a lot of the translation is actually kind of muted because in our English language, in the way to say to do pronouns in general, we actually lose some of it because if you go with the Greek Orthodox version, there's different ways of saying love,
Yeah.
familiar, parental, actual love, and love overwhelming kind of deal. So it's kind of
Eros, agape. Yeah.
yeah, and some of that language, I think we have to develop those different avenues of discussion because we lack the words for it. We use it
Yeah.
more in metaphor, kind of like you're saying, the fairy tales and everything. But we do need to bring those types of things back into the English language as well, because if you think about it, adding those different love in the Bible changes the whole meaning of every passage.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. It does. And I think it opens up when you do it with such an important text as the
Mhm.
Bible that so many people read and use to guide their lives, then it also opens up our ability of how we interact with each other. I mean, the way people emphasize being in love and loving someone, and they're trying to and even when you're trying to, if you had a friend and you had, you have that love for them as a friend and it's the strong foundation and you have all this wonderful shared love in the scope of your friendship.
Mhm.
But then you also have romantic love for them outside the scope of the friendship and you don't want it, and you've actually put in concerted effort so that it doesn't affect your friendship, but it is growing. So it needs to be dealt with. It needs to be made smaller. It needs to be said out loud. So having even language specific to, I have romantic love that I don't want infringing on our friendship love. Do you have romantic love that could reciprocate, or do you reject the romantic love? And I can go through the process of actually making it smaller, since why would I want to give romantic love to someone who doesn't want to give me romantic love? Meanwhile, the friendship love is intact. And we don't have language around that. We just mush it all together, and then people get confused and resentful and frustrated. And that's just one example of the ways that people express love for one another that then gets misunderstood and tears people apart. And that's not what love is supposed to be doing in any form.
Right. So it's a breakdown of communication.
Yeah.
And I think that is a lot of stems with a lot of what happens with our, individual, even if we're talking about politics, it's a breakdown of conversation between
Yeah.
politics as well, because both side has a truth that they both see.
Yeah.
And normally they're seeing just one side of the truth without engaging with the other side. But there's
Yeah.
not really a lot of words to kind of bridge that gap between them because we don't have the vocabulary, we don't have the means as of yet to bridge those kind of gaps. And I think it's always important to have those.
Yeah. And some of those words do exist. It just takes so much effort to use them and to use them effectively. So often politicians, whatever their rhetoric is, their rhetoric is constructed to preach to the choir, so that they're never really reaching across the table to the other side to find that middle ground that helps to bring everyone just taking one step in front of the other in the direction that we all agree to go in, rather than just constantly yelling at each other over the table of the rhetoric that, continues to catalyze the people who are already rooting for them rather than trying to actually unify everyone who's in disagreement. And so politics is very much about just continuing to strengthen your own position without actually meeting people where they're at.
Right.
And that it takes a lot of conscious effort. It takes a commitment for both of the people engaged in dialogue to try to see the other side, to not be like picking holes at each other, to be adding to the conversation rather than to be winning the conversation. I like to joke, though it's completely factual what I'm about to say. I like to joke that my father doesn't have conversations. He has competitions. Whenever he's talking to someone, he has to be winning. He can't just be adding to what the other person has said.
Right. And I think that's why we see a lot of divisiveness, especially in the media, is because if they're not making it into a competition, they don't feel like they're actually doing that job well enough. And they're just playing to the basis of the audience. They're being rewarded for that competition instead of being rewarded for, giving the factual news to bridge the gap and say, look, these are the important news of the day. This is what you guys to keep yourself safe and your family safe, and what other troubles people near you that may not be living in the same community are facing, kind of deal. And that's something that we kind of have to step back and reflect as well as a society, is that we add value to negativity instead of adding value to positivity. Because we say, look, here's a disaster, here's a event, it's widely negative, and then there's a knee-jerk reaction to say, we got to fix this, without understanding what the underlying symptoms are for it. It's kind of like what has been said in social work. It's like, in your rush to fix it, you don't understand what the problem actually is. So
right. You need to be doing both. You need to be taking, like, go ahead, boots on the ground, rush in, but also have those people who are designated looking to the root problem so that we can then put boots to the ground taking care of that.
Right. So it's all of these situations and these events that have been happening, whether it's internally or externally, it's all symptoms of, what's the underlying cause, which nobody really has been looking into and addressing, whether it's the politician, whether you're on one side of the aisle or the other. Nobody really been looking, because they are so certain about their own truths that they don't take a moment to look across and say, no, there's a factual truth that they're saying, and there's a factual truth that they're saying. Let's go together with that common thread, come together, and together we work it. I mean, it's really hard. It's really hard. It's a state of habits that people have to overcome, and it's not easy. It's a lot, like you said, it's a lot of effort to get out of that compliancy of mobility for that. So it's a lot of conversation is getting out of your comfort zone, out of your safe space, so to speak, and allowing yourself to be vulnerable to another person and giving that trust.
There is that. So two things. One, the fact that this is like, so much of this is happening in politics is one of the reasons I love being a writer so much, is the space we then have to really work on just what it's so beautiful how in fantasy and in science fiction and in poetry even, we're able to detail the world as we want to see it. So then we're able to give each other sort of, like, I'm writing my memoir as like a map to myself for, all right, I've been out of this before, I'll get out of it again. And it can be a map to somebody else as framework wise to get them working on their own map. But then the same thing happens in fiction, that we're not just building roadmaps for how people can live their day-to-day lives. We're building roadmaps for how we could build a better society by actually working together. And we're able to play with those characters who aren't having deep conversations. They're having sideways conversations and they're in power. And then you have people who maybe should be in power and are working their way up in the course of the story, who are having the deeper conversations and are really actually looking to make those changes. And I love being able to do that in fiction. And the other thing that you said about getting out of the comfort zone, I actually think it's not about getting out of our comfort zone. It's about expanding our comfort zone. So I have OCD, which is an anxiety-based condition. And in order to live with that anxiety, I have to find ways of feeling comfortable wherever I go. So it's not about doing as I think Eleanor Roosevelt was the one who said it, do one thing a day that scares you. I think I'm paraphrasing that.
Right.
But it's this popular idea of get out of your comfort zone, think outside the box, do this, do that. And we stand on the shoulders of those who came behind us, and future generations are going to stand on our shoulders. And in terms of comfort zone in our lives right now today, I think it's more a matter of expanding your comfort zone so that you just inch it out little by little. You do things that are new. You do stretch yourself. So there is stepping out of your comfort zone a little, but it's in order to pull out the edge, pull out the line that is the fence of your comfort zone, and doing that little by little and more by more till eventually, hopefully, there's nowhere you could go on earth that you're not completely at home in yourself, or as I'm trying to be completely at home in myself, no matter where I go.
Right.
And part of that, very much of expanding that comfort zone, is that process of getting to know other people and being able to see their perspectives and really get deep in on that.
Right. And to do that, one really has to have a solid understanding of their own selves.
Yeah.
Their own values. You need to know what your values are in order to be able to expand your comfort zone. Because if you don't know what your value are, then you're always going to be scared. You're always going to be afraid because you don't know what your limits are.
Yeah.
And anything that comes near you, you will lash out with fear and anger because you don't know, where you can stand. What's your pillars? What's your foundations? So I think a lot of it is understanding what is your foundation, what is your pillar of your own cultural identity, what is your full identity, to understand before you can even go out and stretch those things. Because if you don't know your identity, then it doesn't make sense, as you mentioned, to push yourself forward. And I think it's, just to backtrack a little bit, I think it's a little bit both. It's knowing who you are, your core identity, whether it's culturally, personality, views of things, having a solid foundation. That way, when you meet the new ideas, new experience, you can incorporate those ideas into your personality, and that will allow you to grow like a tree.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, PJ, we got real philosophical while you were gone.
Yeah. Say that again?
We got real philosophical.
I know. I'm seeing. Oh, there's George. Sorry.
I was here all the time. I was just having mic issues.
Oh, technology.
I had to step out. I had to talk to Isaac for a second. Something was not working well.
Isaac would know.
Okay. Let me, this is absolutely fascinating. In terms of the storytelling and all that stuff. My question is, would you be interested in actually creating your own set of cards?
Oh, yeah. I mentioned before that I use my Saints Tarot deck to work out a deck of prayer cards, like Oracle type cards that I'm doing. And I'm actually going to go through the deck again and make a deck of cards specific to the fairy godmother spread that I do, that it's the 3 fairy tale virtues, the challenge, and the lesson. And so just going through and it basically being a deck of fairy godmother says. And so each card would be just simple script of what her advice is. And then you'd have the directions of, so this is like the kindest thing that you can do for yourself. This is the most intelligent thing that you can do for yourself. This is the right thing to do. And then you have the challenge of what you're trying to do, that these 3 virtues are helping you to achieve. And then the lesson is what you should be able to do when you've accomplished your challenge. And and I have ideas for tarot decks, but I'm always changing my mind about them. But it's only when an idea actually really crystallizes that I'm like, all right, take an action. So got the deck of prayers, the deck of fairy godmothering, and actually right now I'm working on turning an epic pantoum I wrote into a deck of cards for a new edition, because I've always wanted it to be a deck of cards, and now I'm doing it.
That's awesome. Yeah. In terms of tarot cards, can you just tell us about the baseline for tarot cards? Where did they come from? What's their history? What is everyone working off of? What's the core elements in
All right.
history and all that stuff?
Yes. So the core elements, it was really it was founded mostly in Europe. There was a really romantic history that is complete BS that somebody made up years ago, that the tarot came from Egypt and it was originally coins. Makes 0 sense. How would you shuffle 78? And they were actually described as being large discs. How would you shuffle 78 of those? You wouldn't. It's completely nonsensical, this romantic history of tarot cards coming out of Egypt. And Eva's like, no, but they had paper then. It's like they had papyrus, which was paper hammered onto itself. You don't shuffle papyrus. That is a terrible idea. It will fall apart after multiple uses. It's completely illogical. It's a fake history, and easily torn apart, if you will. Excuse the pun, but that is just the perfect pun for that. So it says here, the birth of tarot. The first tarot deck was created in northern Italy when an unknown designer added a 5th suit containing 22 allegorical figures to the already existing deck of cards. The date was around 1430. The first written record of the tarot is from 1442 from the court records in Ferrara, and the oldest existing cards are the decks that were hand painted with gold leaf backgrounds for the Visconti Sforza family, the rulers of Milan, and those are dated 1445. And so it was really, an excuse for artists to make teeny tiny bits of art for ruling families, rich people who were acting as their patrons. And not a lot of those decks survive because, they're paper and they get shuffled and things fall apart. So you have your major arcana, which are the 22 big trump cards. That did not go as smooth as I thought. This would be easier with the fairy tale book, maybe. I don't know. So it starts with your major arcana, and and there's too much information about major arcana books because they're so rich in art. So you have your 22 cards, and they each represent a different figure. So you have the Fool, the Magician, I could just read, that would be quicker. The Magician, the High Priestess, the High Priest, the Empress, the Emperor, the Hierophant. Oh, Hierophant is the High Priest. Depends on the deck, because they change the name slightly of certain cards in the major arcana, like they do with the pip cards I was saying before about like Prince and Princess, or Knave and Knight, or Knight and Squire. The Lovers, all these different archetypes in here. The Chariot, the Moon, the Star, Strength, Sun, Temperance, the Hermit, the Wheel of Fortune, Justice, the Hanged Man. A really interesting fact about the Wheel of Fortune is that another name for the Wheel of Fortune, because, a meaning of the Wheel of Fortune is prudence. And in the major arcana, I can use words goodly, there is all 4 of the 4 cardinal virtues: prudence, temperance, strength, and justice are represented in the major arcana, but prudence is the only one that isn't mentioned by name on the card. But it is typically accepted to be the Wheel of Fortune card. The Hanged Man is considered a reversal of the Fool. Death is the most famous card in the tarot deck, and literally every storyteller ever uses it wrong. If you are a storyteller, don't use this card wrong. Death represents transformation. Like, it happens halfway through the major arcana. If you look at the major arcana actually as a storyline, as the hero's journey, it comes halfway through. It's a major reversal. It's a major shift. It's a major transformation. It is not the end of anything, which is also something because we mentioned suicidal ideation before, it's something I remind myself, like, if my brain is bringing up images of death, it's because it needs me to make a major friggin' shift in my life right now. Not end my life, shift. So that's how I view that. And
so death, it represents change.
It represents change, like the ultimate change, the biggest possible change at that moment.
Good. Cool.
So then you have, of course, the devil.
So death is metaphorical, where it's the death of your old self and the rebirth and the birth of your new self.
Yeah, and even in and it gets that metaphor because of the way even we talk about people dying, that they pass on to the next life, the afterlife. We have these references for things happening after death. We as a species are not wholly comfortable with death being an end anyway. So cultures around the world just friggin' riddle that word with all sorts of nuance and meaning, and it all points to transformation and change, which is really great. And that's how nature works. Like, something gets decomposed and its elements are essentially recycled by nature to make new things. It's fantastic. La la la. But yeah, so you have these 22 cards numbered 1 to 21. The Fool is either marked 0 or not given a number at all. And they all sort of trump each other. It's a succession of power. It's a hero's journey. It's, if you're looking at it super metaphorically, it's the journey of the soul. And then you have your 4 suits: cups, swords, coins, and wands. With the cups in a standard deck of playing cards would be the heart. It is the suit of emotion, and it is the suit of the element of water. Sword is then in a standard deck a spade, and it is the element of air and the intellect, the cerebral processes, your thinking. Coins are sometimes pentacles, depending on the deck, will be diamonds on a standard card deck, and it represents the earth, and it represents the material aspect of reality. So it can be finances, but it can also be your physical survival. And so it's the grounded suit. And so the element there is earth. And then the 4th suit, representing fire and creativity, is the staffs, which in a standard deck of cards would be the clubs. And then from ace to king, the numbers of the cards are taken largely from sacred geometry and mathematics of the mystic Kabbalah. And so it's taken from that and also twists it, because you can't do anything square when you're dealing with artists. Let's be real. So the numbers have, their immediate meaning. So an ace, we already have so much in language that when somebody's an ace, they're number 1. They're the best. They're the best. They're the prime. The ace, even in the card game of blackjack, is both the weakest and the strongest card. It can mean 1 or it can mean 11, much like the Fool card does in the Major Arcana. And the Ace card takes on that kind of sensibility as well in the tarot, usually meaning a new beginning. So Ace has new beginnings and potential, and then you cross-reference that with the element of the suit that it's in. And so a new way of thinking if it's the Ace of Swords, or a new financial opportunity if it's the Ace of Coins, a new creative project if it's the Ace of Staffs, or a new relationship, or a new stage in a relationship if it's the Ace of Cups. And so you just go on like that with the different numbers throughout the suits. And but you always want to look for, if you do go looking for your own tarot deck, go looking for the boxed sets, because the cards will be about the size of a standard tarot deck, but then the box will also have, it has to be large enough to hold the book that accompanies the deck. And so when you go looking for it, then you have a nice thick resource. And this particular artist, they only did one print run of the Saints deck. So as much as I want to recommend that, I cannot, because it's not exactly available for sale anymore unless you have buckets to spend. But it was designed by Robert M. Place, who has done several tarot decks over the years and continues to create tarot decks. And if you look for his art for his website online, Robert Place Tarot, it always has the information for whatever his newest deck is. But he has some great decks, and he takes from various traditions and really focuses on one at a time, creating each deck. And so it's really, he makes some really beautiful stuff. But this one's my favorite. Obviously, I'm biased. Had it forever. But yeah, so that is as quick an overview as I think I can get over the tarot and framework. But then again, all those meanings get further enriched by whatever the artwork happens to be. So yeah.
Wow. Now, I may have missed it. I'm sorry, I came in late. Was this the topic for today, or did you guys just?
I was not given a topic for today. I came in and they were George and Denali were talking about what Denali had been working on with the cover art and like getting the book together, and then I was asked how I outline. And it turned into a conversation about tarot, because one of the many methods I use for outlining things is tarot. And now we are here.
I got it. Wow, okay.
Yeah. But to bring in topic to his show,
yeah.
It's always it's humor in sci-fi as well, but tarot card always is an element of catalyst and humor depending on what you're doing. If you think about Big with Tom Hanks, you have kind of like the magic machine. Game of Thrones, you have the old witch who tells Cersei about her future that comes out true. And I think it's something that, as you mentioned before, that a lot of fiction, and whether it's television show, books, or comic books, or even movies, they use tarot card as a divination, as not as a what is the present, but what is in the future.
Yeah.
And it's even in older works in Shakespeare, like Macbeth, he has a reading, and because he follows what the reading as a fatalistic character, he does everything to fulfill that prophecy, even though it wasn't self-fulfilling.
Yeah. Yeah, storytellers love to pick at that question of whether or not fortune telling is actually a thing. They love just picking at it like it's a little scab, but then they're always erring on the side of it's initially presented as fortune telling. And something I do want to play with in my own work in the future is having someone who deals the cards but is telling you about what's going on right now. It's like, no, I'm not telling you your future. And they even come back and like are furious about how things turn out. It's like, I said, if you behave this way, this is the outcome. And if you behave that way, that is the outcome. Because human behavior The cards just told me what was at work now. And I told you the 2 paths available to you, and you chose wrong. You did that. You decided what the outcome was going to be. So I want to play with that, but yeah.
I thought it was a fascinating explanation, by the way, Rose. I actually think it's very interesting that you guide your work in this way. It's I'm intrigued, actually.
I like that it takes a little bit of pressure off of my creativity. Like, my creativity is still very much there, but I never have that moment of, oh my God, how do I start? Because if I just have as my default, I'm going to start by shuffling the cards. If I agree with I'll either go with the cards or I won't, and I'll just do it based on that. And it relieves the pressure of the blank page, because at the very least, I'll be taking notes first. Will be my first step. I'll be taking notes about what the cards say. And it helps just to relieve that pressure, just to get things rolling.
Sure. It can even be a challenge for you to. It could also be viewed as a challenge at times for you to fit into what you're being, guided to do.
Oh yeah. Like, looking at the 5 cards I pulled for my memoir, I actually didn't initially pull them for my memoir. I pulled them to do a rewrite of the Frog Prince, actually the original Grimm version, the Frog King, where he doesn't get kissed and turns into frog. He gets thrown. He gets his head bashed against a wall as a frog, and then becomes a king with time died. It's a whole thing, and I was going to do a retelling of that from the frog's perspective, and then as I was working on it, it morphed into this memoir project. La la la. But so now it started off as one thing, became this new project, and there is a challenge of and in each little step of the story, it's like, all right, so I did this thing. I need to remember to do this for myself. I need to remember to do this for myself in the story, because that's what the dealing of the cards is about. So, yeah.
Okay. You said a few times you were 13 when you got your first card. What was the click in the back of the mind that made you go for this? I mean, 13 it's a very young age. I mean, you're just learning about life and everything.
Yeah. So we had just left Ohio and moved to Delaware, and it was the summer before the school year started. And so that would have been the start of 8th grade. And I had actually, as a result of my OCD, I had actually already kind of lost my faith as a kid and was working my way back to it. Didn't actually officially find it till 2 years after I got this deck. But I remember always being interested. Like any storyteller, you want to pick at this idea of, is fortune telling real? And so I saw this box set, and I knew, and it detailed on the back of the box that it includes a history of the tarot. I was like, oh, great. So I'll be able to figure out, from this expert, what's actually going on in the history of the tarot, what's actually going on here. Is it fortune telling? Because I'll be able to tell that from its history, whether or not it's able to actually predict future events. And then also the fact that it is based on Catholic mysticism, I thought, well, if my mom makes a face about it, it's a good halfway place. Yeah, I'm interested in this thing. I was disconnected from my faith at the time, and here was this thing that was weirdly rooted in my faith, but at the same time distant from it. It was the kind of thing that my faith would look down on, which is really how I felt at the time. And so I thought, well, if I get this will be like, if I go up to the counter and mom says absolutely not, then I'll know I'm evil. It was one of many OCD conversations I was having with myself, because my root fear as a kid was that I was evil and or possessed by evil. And as soon as people found out, I would be subsequently shunned to death, because no one on earth is as evil as me and able to bring themselves down to my level of evilness in order to put myself and the rest of the world out of the misery of my continued existence. Fun with OCD in here. That's what me at 13 was. And so I had as my Beauty and the Beast test, you could call it, going up to the register with this deck. And my mom said, it's not real. And I said, yeah, I know. I want to learn about it. And I figure it's got saints on it. It'll be a good way to learn. She's like, all right, then I'll buy it for you. I was like, whoa, which weirdly helped my mental health a lot momentarily. but also ended up getting me my first tarot deck. So something that is both firmly rooted in the faith I was disconnected from, but also disconnected from the faith, being looked down on, it being tarot, me being physiologically female. My church does not like me. Yeah, immediate friendship right off the bat with this deck.
Okay, yeah, I'm thoroughly impressed. I mean, this whole experience has been epic. And I'm saying it in a very conservative, very lightly manner. I mean, this is totally epic. The tarot cards themselves.
Yeah.
I remember one time, long time ago, just I finished college and we were celebrating, so we all took off from Toronto. We went up north to a place called Wasaga Beach, and at this house that 20 of us rented, and we just found we all found our little cubby hole in the house, whether it was on the floor, on a couch, on top of a.
Let me just point out that only a Canadian would go north of Toronto to go to the beach.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry, George.
It's true. It's so true. So, yeah, we go north for the summer. So I got my hands on a deck, tarot deck, and one of the girls there was a user of it, and I didn't even know it was a tarot deck. So I shuffled it, and I came up with a card. I don't remember the card. I go, oh.
Do you remember a picture?
I don't remember the picture. That's just it. But the thing is, what I remember is that I thoroughly shuffled it a second time, and I came up with exactly the same card. At that point, her face turned white. She grabbed the deck from me and she said, "Don't touch this ever again."
Why is Rose going like that? Why are you going like that?
The nodding when you pull cards more than once, the jumpers. It's something that people tarot enthusiasts talk about, how if you're shuffling cards and you're doing a spread, but then cards kind of fall out of the deck, you didn't deal them, they fall out. It's like this deck wants you to know something right there. There is something going on in the air spiritually, you're leaving. Because I use the Tarot of the Saints, I like to say to my mama, it's you're leaving room for the Holy Spirit to say something. It's like a card falls out, the Holy Spirit's trying to just give you an extra dose of something. Oh my, and actually I say that more often to one of my sisters, who gets kind of freaked out when I do tarot readings for the other sisters. She's real concerned. And I was doing a reading for one of my sisters, and I pulled a card out because it put it to the side because it had fallen out, and I was still shuffling to do the proper dealing, and I put a card aside, and she said, "What's that card? What's going on there?" She was immediately freaked out. I was like, "It's just a jumper. It'll apply to the whole reading later, just like an extra message. It's fine." So nodding when cards keep coming up. Also, one of the sisters that I do give readings to, there is a particular card that comes up almost every time I give her a reading, and well, there's two cards that come up a lot when I give her readings. The first is the Queen of Staffs, which we laugh about because she'll make some reference about, or the first time it came up ever in a reading, she said, the card is about how you're able to appreciate both things that are really elegant and things that are really rustic. And her response, because she was just being a jerk and just dicking around, was she said, "Oh yeah, like Wiener Schnitzel and Taco Bell." like those were the two examples that she got. I was like, "Which one is elegant?" And she's just like, "I don't know." So that's one card that comes up for her a lot. And the other one is Temperance, and she gets so mad when that card comes up because she thinks I'm telling her not to drink. Is the joke of it? Which, I mean, it could very well to anyone who gets that card. But when cards come up again and again, it's a sign that there is something at play here, and people will always question you when you're dealing tarot and cards come up, the same cards come up for them again and again. Oh, well, you're rigging this somehow. You're just pulling these cards because you want to, like you're palming them somehow. It's like, my hands are really little. They're really little. Like, I can wear child's gloves and have on Sunday school occasions because it makes them giggle. And these cards are really big. I cannot palm these cards. This is what it looks like for me to try to palm. See, it's not even happening. It's not, my hand is not, I can only hold the card by having fingers on either side, and you could tell that I'm holding it. Like, there's no palming here. That's such a great card. So, I mean, they're all great. So jumpers, it's a thing that we all kind of accept happens, that when the spirit is at work, it wants to tell you something.
So what was the jumper, George, that kept coming up?
Yeah.
I don't remember. I honestly don't remember. I know it wasn't the death card.
Yeah. But if she was freaking out about it, like, what cards in here, like even in this deck, it's negative. Like,
what you know what? What I can remember, it was it was a card that was similar to a death card. It had the character had a stick in his hand.
Mm-hmm.
That maybe it was a sword.
Judgment?
I don't know.
Judgment usually has a trumpet in his hand. For a stick, if it's a major arcana card, you would be, I mean, in my deck with a stick, you have the Chariot, but you usually have a Chariot in other decks.
Yeah, I would know if it was a death card. That would have easily stood out to me. But no, it was a card. It was definitely a card, and the character had some sort of stick in his hand. Or maybe it was a sword, maybe, but I don't remember exactly what it was. But that whole experience really stuck out at me.
I think I know what card she was frustrated about, because there's two cards in here that are regularly, like, no matter what deck they're in, the imagery tends to be very dark. And even in here, one card is the Four of Coins, and in my deck, the image is when Judas betrayed Jesus with a kiss. The other card, the one that is frequently viewed as meaning something violent, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you will befall violence. And it's a warning, like her saying, like, never look at this deck again. It's like, the deck is trying to tell him something, jerk. That drives me nuts when people, like, are scared of the cards and they're like, just argument. I could go on a rant about it, but I won't right this second. I found the card that I was looking for. So this is the Seven of Staffs, and on my deck,
let's just go big here.
Yeah. And in my deck, that is the moment of Cain killing Abel.
Uh-huh.
And so it's a card of power struggle. We all know that, like, Cain and Abel is the most famous sibling rivalry betrayal story. But it's not just about being betrayed by someone outside of you. It's also a warning against, like, betraying yourself. Like, Denali and I were talking before about how a lot of understanding others, and, well, going outside your comfort zone, being able to have those conversations with other people is largely about, you know, knowing yourself, knowing what you value, and trusting that. And in the story of Cain and Abel, Abel trusted himself, trusted his relationship with God, and Cain was so fixated on their relationship that he wasn't actually really just getting deeper in on his own relationship and working to mend that and to deepen that. And so out of jealousy, he kills his brother. And so Seven of Staffs is the card that ended up getting associated with that image in my deck. I wonder what it is in other decks. But it is usually a card of some kind of betrayal going on. And people who tend to there are two different ways to read imagery from a tarot card. And one is to look at the imagery as being indicative of what is going to happen, which I think is what she was doing. Or actually, I think she may have been more along the line of the card. She may have been in the self-fulfilling prophecy mode of using decks, where what you see in a card, if you believe in the surface level image, like she didn't want to even have to explain to you what the card meant because she didn't want to freak you out about it. She just wanted you to stop because that card came up twice. Yeah, and so if there was something in your life at that time where you were at risk of some kind of familial betrayal or self-betrayal, especially self-betrayal, that would have been what it was telling you was at work.
Wow.
George,
I don't know what else was going on in your life then. So I don't know whether or not.
We just finished.
What was the rest of the beach story, George?
The what story?
The beach story. How did that finish?
Well, we were in this cottage at Wasaga Beach. I picked up a deck. I shuffled it once. Saw a card. I go, okay. Shuffled it again. Same card came up, and I said, hey, the same card came up. And when I shuffled it twice, and she turned white, she pulled it away from me. And she said, don't ever touch this again. I shrugged my shoulders. Okay, fine. And we just had a great time at the beach. And it was Monday morning. We headed back for. Oh, wait a minute. One of the guys who had the van, who was driving us home, had lost his glasses. So he drove, because he was the only guy who had an actual license at the time. He's the guy who drove the van home totally blind because he wore bifocal glasses.
Oh, God.
So all of us piled into the van, the Mystery Machine van, and we're all going like, okay, drive straight. Okay, you're steering a little to the left. Okay, come back to the right. Okay, you're too much to the right. Steer to the left. Watch out, there's a car coming up ahead of you. Watch out, there's a red light. Come to a stop. Okay, slowly go forward. The light turned green. Okay, we're coming up to a rail track. And we did that for the entire trip. The trip should have took about an hour and a half. It took like 4 hours because we were giving it. And when we finally got into Toronto, and we directed him to his house, he got the glasses on. We were going like, thank God. As soon as the door opened and the car came to a park, we're all going like, yes. And that was the most stressful time in that weekend. But everything else was just beach, relax. Nothing really. Oh, the neighbor made a lot of noise. He and his girlfriend made a lot of noise. So we couldn't even, and no one because the cottages were right up close to each other. No, we couldn't even get a good night's sleep at all. It was ridiculous. And then when one day, was it the second day? I didn't see myself, but one of the guys or the girls, I think, one of the girls got up early to go get some sort of breakfast, and she came back, and she said, "Oh my God!" I'm going like, "What is it? What is it?" The girl next door. Yeah. She looks like she would. You would just, she popped out of a heavy metal magazine, and we're going like, where? So all the guys go looking outside and say, where? Well, they left for the weekend. They're done. I go, why are you telling us this? It was funny. But that moment when we were all outside, led to someone getting nostalgia for home and stuff like that. And we went to the local. Get this, we went to the local phone booth off of the highway, and we were all trying to put quarters and dimes and nickels and stuff like that to make long distance phone calls. And sometimes the phone worked, sometimes the phone didn't work, and it was the strangest thing. I mean, I think collectively we lost about $75. So that's basically what the whole weekend experience was. But when I shuffled that deck, that was the first night we were there. Just weird experience.
Wow, George, I'm sorry, but I have to step out. I got to tell you, this was a very interesting stream. It was very, very interesting.
Oh yeah. How long we've been at? Oh my gosh, look at that! For
2 hours and 15 minutes and counting.
Oh, so someone's counting. Well, if everyone wants to take a break and we'll continue this on another day, great. If not, I would certainly I have so many more questions to ask. So let me know what all of you think. Okay, PJ's out.
I gotta go. But if you guys continue this, I'm for another day. I'm down with that.
Yeah, let's go for another day because one of my OCD management alarms came off. I gotta do a blood sugar thing.
All right. Sounds
Bye,
good.
Denali. Bye, Rose.
Bye,
Bye,
guys.
PJ.
Bye,
Bye,
guys.
Denali.
Bye, George. Thanks.
Okay.
Bye,
okay.
George.
Bye,
We'll talk in
everybody.
DMs to find another time.
Absolutely. And you got my email regarding the book?
DM me. I'll double check. I'll check my DMs for that.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Take care.
Take care.
All right, Denali.
Yes.
Before we take off,
Sure.
can you bring up the Immortal Mask on your book on your side, and let's screen share it. We start off talking about the Immortal Mask. Let's close it off talking about the Immortal Mask. The last image of the stream will be the Immortal Mask.
Sounds good. Very good. Share screen. Share screen. All right.
Here we go. There we go. The Immortal Mask. That's beautiful.
Yep. So, as we're ending this show, you can actually go to the website, theimmortalmask.com. It will self-direct here to the cover. We're always updating as new development happens. But if you want to get the latest news, the inside scoop regarding the Immortal Mask, just at the bottom of the page, just enter your email address and you are automatically subscribed to the newsletter. We are currently just, getting a lot of people and a lot of feedback coming in. So be part of the action and be part of the journey of the Immortal Mask.
And signing up for the newsletter, when you go have your campaign ready to launch, everyone in the newsletter who's interested in supporting you in the campaign will get great discounts.
Right. They'll get a discounts. There'll be promotion. Right now, the first promotion is we're trying to increase the number of people who sign up to the newsletter. So once we reach, the target that we want, everybody who sign up will, if they decide to purchase the book when we launch our campaign, we'll get an exclusive limited edition trading card that'd be playable for the game that we'll have for the Immortal Mask.
And that's a board game.
Correct.
Wow, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
That sounds absolutely fantastic.
Absolutely.
And where are they going again? Denali's.com?
They can go to denali's.com or theimmortalmask.com, and those both pages will redirect you to the cover pages. And right below the cover page is where you can just input your email address. hit submit, and you're already part of the newsletter with that. And if you use the same email to when you purchase their campaign, we can look up that email, see that you're part of the campaign, and say, hey, this is one of our first subscribers to the newsletter, so we will make sure that you get that reward as well when we meet that criteria.
That's absolutely fantastic. Wonderful.
Yep.
Absolutely wonderful. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Thank you, people who were in the chat. When this is going to be repeating, whether it's on YouTube or BitChute, thank you for watching the show. We really appreciate it. And there's going to be more shows like this. I'm just getting my feet wet. It's been a while since I've streamed, and that I had my YouTube channel, all in tip-top shape. And any last words, Denali, before we leave?
Well, keep an eye on Twitter. Join at Denali Comics for Instagram, Denali101 for Twitter, and Denali Comics YouTube. I'll be uploading stuff, all of those social medias in the upcoming weeks. And if you have questions, don't hesitate to DM me or send me messages, and I'm quick to reply.
Fantastic. All right, and we're going to end this show in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Peace.